What incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or mass quitting? I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all, only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their job back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight, but it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the weekend. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out and resumes don't come flooding in. They're still trying to recover. Next story. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life, and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw that as an opportunity to buddy up with the owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf later, the chef comes back to work to a pink slip. 27 out of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately. Next story. Train company in Sweden. One day, many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room, 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence, overtime. This document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we came home early. Under time, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union reps, and a huge outcry overall. Date on the document and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. Next story. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It has giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock, and clay and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was ever even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put it into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total, about 40 people were fired, and I was put on another crew. Next story. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit, and the majority else were outside with signs the next day until they eventually switched it almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. Edit. I didn't quit. I actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. I understand when, there's a good thing going, you don't want it to change. It's been this way forever. It's great. We love it. However, let's be so real. Changing a recipe every now and then isn't the end of the world, guys. Like, I respect the loyalty to the original formula, but give the new pickle a try, at least. Next story. From what I understood, I caused a domino effect at a local big chain pizza place. The pizza place I worked at wasn't a full-service restaurant, which they're mainly known for. It was a takeout or delivery-only store, located in a shopping center with several other businesses. During the 2 years I worked there, we'd gone through 3 store managers. The first manager was awesome. He was firm, strict, but fair. The second manager was a bit of a ditz. He went by the book, but you could tell his heart was not really in it. I think he preferred to be a driver than a manager. The third manager was an all-out female dog, mistreated the employees, especially the men, and she'd do things that only benefited her, not others. I was getting fed up. She had put a suggestion box outside of her office. I wrote a very lengthy suggestion that she treat her employees with respect. She basically fired me. She said I resigned. I didn't care. I was no longer under her tyrannical rule. A friend of mine who still worked there called me a week later and told me 3 other people quit because, like me, they got tired of her crap. Later that same year, I quit late summer. About 2 weeks after Halloween, my parents ordered a pizza from that pizza place's major competitor. They asked me to give the driver the money, and when I did it, it turned out to be a driver I knew from the other place. She told me she quit on Halloween night because she wanted to take her 4-year-old trick-or-treating, but the manager said no. Then she, the manager, took off early in the middle of a freaking rush to take her own 8-year-old daughter trick-or-treating. The driver that was now working for the competitor told me she threw her hat at the manager, told her to screw off, and quit right there. A year or 2 later, I ran into the old assistant manager who was now working at an Arby's. She told me many others had quit and that the manager was no longer there. She and her husband were fired due to stealing money from that store. Karma. It works. Okay, Opie, you can call it karma, but it was just theft. It wasn't like what goes around comes around. It was just they did something illegal. That's all. True karma would be something a little more out of their control, you know what I mean? But I bet she has that coming to her too. Next story. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting. Her brother was in charge of the technical operations and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week, but normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find the office locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner, and his wife had quit. He wouldn't say why, but assured me it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I would have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what had happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually, they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal, but I still didn't have any idea what the hell had happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later. I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, and then the tech support guy grins and says, "So do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" No, but I've certainly been curious. Owner didn't tell me, and I didn't want to pry. "He and his wife got excommunicated." I just give a blank stare. "Didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses?" Apparently, everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who've been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife were swingers, and someone in the church found out. I know this is early in the thread, but this has to be the winner for the most undeserved mass quitting of all time. Look, guys, I'm not going to cut it 2 ways. I have strong feelings about the Jehovah's Witnesses. These 2 people were just living their private lives in private and then lost their entire social circle, everything for it. Yeah, man, just like Jesus would do, you know? Next story. "Gather around, children, and let me regale you with a tale of retail misery and woe." I'm not going to do that voice the whole time. About 7 years back, I worked at Best Buy. My store was located across from one of the busiest malls in the Northeast, in an area that was a mix of lower and upper class. Around July, the store started doing one of those promotions wherein they offer you magazines at checkout. You sign up for 5 free ones, and then if you don't cancel, you start getting charged the yearly subscription fee for them. The cashiers were incentivized to get as many magazine subscriptions as possible. As I worked loss prevention, I didn't really care at all about this program. I didn't care until October. Suddenly, we started getting massive complaints about people getting charged for subscriptions who never signed up for them. It started as 1 or 2, and we just assumed they forgot to cancel. But soon, several dozen angry customers were complaining to us, corporate, and anyone who would listen. We started an investigation. Lots of overtime and crappy hours going through camera footage and register logs. Turns out one of the cashiers, who was never an okay employee even on her best day, figured out she could just sign people up for the magazines even if they said no, as long as they were a rewards cards member and their info was in the system. She used this to get a record number of subscriptions and won the weekly prizes every week, until the other cashiers caught on and started doing the same. In the end, it turns out that every single front register area cashier had done this except for one kid who was hired a few weeks before the investigation. Word came down from corporate that we had to fire every single cashier except the new kid. Oh, and the day they handed down this judgment, the Friday before Black Friday. That's right, with 1 week to spare before the biggest shopping day of the year, we were ordered to fire all of our cashiers. As you can imagine, this didn't go well with management, but their hands were tied. So we tried to hire and train as many people as we could in a week. But as you can imagine, that Black Friday was chaos. Some employees worked 20 hours straight, 10 in their department and 10 on front register. All managers and supervisors worked close to 24 hours. They even tried to convince LP to lend a hand, to which we laughed, of course. I don't want to know how much they lost between the lawsuits from the customers for fraud and the labor board fines and complaints filed by employees held late on Black Friday. Next story. I worked for an $800 million a year system integrator in the Southeast. Each department had 2 leads. The first was typically an MBA who served as a liaison to sales and marketing. The second was the engineering lead that was responsible for platform integration, testing, and coordinating with the support and network services teams. I was the engineering lead. Our VP was one of those guys who promotes a hyper-competitive environment and wanted the company to be staffed with sharks, not sheep. When I got there, what little documentation there was on systems and processes was horribly outdated or non-existent. I changed all of that, worked obscene hours, and I would personally travel to high-revenue clients' sites if there was a problem. That work paid off with a $22 million rugged Served contract. At this point, I had served 3 years with this company. It wasn't that old, and I climbed the ranks fast. I was making new college grad pay, which was about $6,000 below the median household income for my area. I know what you're thinking, engineering team lead with a dismal salary? The job market wasn't great, so at that point I was just happy to get my first job. This isn't the place you stay to work in any form of engineering or technology, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. I asked for a raise, and honestly, I was only hoping for $1 or $2 an hour raise. I was told they couldn't do it. Keep in mind I'd been working 50 to 60 hour weeks, training the support team on systems, and assisting network engineers in the field. The stress level was unbearable, and it pretty much destroyed my first marriage. Fast forward about 3 weeks, and a friend in the field asks me if I'd be interested in doing backups, server maintenance, and interface work for a hospital. He said the pay isn't amazing, but it would be a lot more laid back. At that point, it sounded like heaven. When I put in my notice, the VP completely freaked out. He said, "If this is about money, we can get you more money." This is literally about 3 weeks after they told me they couldn't give me a tiny raise. I said I already accepted the offer, and he offered to double my salary. I was completely floored, but also really upset. I quit on principle. I spent my last 2 weeks making sure my partner and subordinates knew how things were done, where documentation was, and I did a DoD-grade wipe of my desktop system when I left. In a complete lack of oversight, they didn't end my VPN access or email accounts. I thought it was weird, but I figured I would check my email for a while after I left to make sure I notified any senders of personal emails that I didn't have that address anymore. I then noticed that someone was sending emails and signing it with my name. They were even referencing events from interactions I had had with some of these people. Needless to say, I set up an auto-respond email on a Friday after I was sure everybody had gone home. I typically got hundreds of emails over the weekend, and they all got an automated response that I hadn't been employed with the company for over a month and left a forwarding address. My former coworkers heard about it, and they thought it was shady as hell. They had also tried to push all of my old work onto them, and one of the guys that I hung around with socially, and still do, told me that they told one guy that he couldn't leave on time one day to see a play his daughter was in. It was an event he had told them about weeks in advance. That's when the domino effect began. Within the span of a month, the other manager, the team leads, the specialists, and the techs had all quit. There was no more enterprise products engineering department. They hired some kids fresh out of college that ran it into the ground, and subsequently they lost every single CNE, MCSE, and CCIE. They were super sharp guys when it came to networking, but they needed support on the back end for enterprise hardware. I have never felt so vindicated in my life. I've heard that after that, the VP was moved out of a management position. They asked me to come back more than once and I refused. I stopped answering their calls. I actually made a little less than I did there at the new job, but now I make about twice what they paid me. I'm also fully vested for retirement and have much better benefits. I guess the double salary thing paid off in the long run, and I went back to school to get another degree. I'm 3 classes from finishing and I really like this job. I really like my team and the creative freedom I have too. Next story. In a team of 30 IT consultants that had been working a big project for a couple of years, the standing offer that governed rates, etc. had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting company, middleman, was just a week away, and we hadn't seen the paperwork. Just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company could be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit, others yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. Yeah, right. But the damage was done. It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They'd been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, "That 30% cut 6 months ago was a nasty, eh?" Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was a fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was, their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. Next story. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in the business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge. His first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days notice to move with no moving compensation or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I'd already been looking for a job. The writing was on the wall. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic, said, "What are we supposed to do? No one can fill your job here and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus. The company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 months after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. I don't understand why people who are incredibly rich just give their children jobs like that. Like, there are certain jobs that you can nepotism hire for, and it's fine, right? Like, it's totally okay if they're in some lower position and they got the job, they skipped the line a bit, whatever, man, it's annoying, but it doesn't destroy anything. A move like this dude who just finished his university career is now going to lead this multi-million-dollar company, and you really thought that would go well. I don't know, it's just a reminder that being a billionaire does not mean you're better at everyone else at making decisions or anything. Maybe even at business. Because if you understood business, surely you wouldn't do this, right? Next story. Worked in a bar and a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus barbacks. Thought something was weird about our credit card tips. Went to bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks, examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as hell. Owner comes in to see how things are going. Bar manager confronts him. Owner denies wrongdoing, claims what he's doing is illegal. It wasn't. He was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says, "Tough crap." Bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the other bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff joins us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the bull crap. Left over 500 people in the club with a no bar staff, 0 craps given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Screw that guy. Next story. We lost a third of our staff over the course of 3 months. People hate where I work, including myself. I work in HR. Try having to deal with 100 staff leaving in a short time frame. Generally, people were fed up with the stupid crap that goes on here. False promises, failing to deliver, promising change, keeping poor performers because they're too desperate for staff, hiring stupid freaking people. I did say I work in HR, but I have no pull. I'm just the lowest on the totem pole, practically a glorified secretary. Also, I have to be chipper and supportive of the bad decisions that get made around here. I'm convinced my managers don't like me, especially my direct report, because I speak my mind. I want to get the hell out of here. Job interview of my life is tomorrow. Perhaps I can put all of this nonsense behind me. Next story. It was a mass firing of many of the employees from a distribution center. It was a consumer electronics company. TVs, VCRs, this was in the 70s, cassette players, amps, tuners, equalizers, etc. I was the parts department supervisor at the time, so I spent my time making sure that repair parts were sent out on a timely basis. The company had 3 categories of stock. A. New, could be sold to the retail market. B. Was refurbished and was only sold to a limited market with a limited warranty. C. Was cosmetically damaged and could only be purchased by employees and was never supposed to be resold. Prices were dirt cheap just to move the goods so they don't sit in the warehouse for too long. Senior management got the bright idea of reclassifying A stock to C stock and buying it themselves. They were, of course, reselling the materials to anyone and everyone, including some of the retail stores that they'd established relationships with. I knew this was going on, but I was young, married, and had a child and a mortgage and could simply not afford to buy anything, even if I could turn a profit on it. So one day, a senior VP from corporate headquarters walks in unannounced. We usually had advance notice of their coming in. He walks straight into the branch manager's office without saying anything to anyone and closes the door. About a half hour later, the branch manager comes out of his office, white as a ghost, and leaves the building. The SVP, who has now taken over the branch manager's office, sends for the sales manager, who goes in, closes the door, and exits about a half hour later. Also white as a ghost, and he promptly leaves the building. On it goes. Rumors are running rampant, but since every person leaves the building, and this is before cell phones and texting, no one is really sure what's happening. The service manager, my boss, then the office manager, then the quality control manager, the warehouse manager, then they start with the supervisors. Eventually, they get around to me and I'm crapping bricks. So I go into the office and said, "Hi, Dave." I knew him from past meetings. He immediately asks me what I knew about the C-stock sales. I feigned ignorance about what the others were doing and told him that I had all the equipment I needed and could afford, so I hadn't bought any. He tells me that he's firing people who are obviously abusing the employee purchase program and that I hadn't abused it, and I wouldn't be let go. But he says I have to leave the building without saying anything to anyone and go home until I heard from him. He took down my phone number and away I went. Several days later, Dave calls me back into the building and asks if I'm familiar with inventory and cycle counting. I said, sure. We did cycle counting in the parts department regularly and had an annual physical inventory of the entire building once a year. He tells me to schedule one to be done over the upcoming weekend for all the finished goods. He tells me that I am now the highest-ranking employee at the site and that I would be running the building until they could hire replacements for the individuals who were let go. I ran that building for 4 or 5 months and never even got a raise or promotion. Although Dave took my wife and I out to a very expensive dinner as a thank you for keeping my nose clean. Honestly, I'd be mad, man. Your responsibilities got increased and your pay didn't. And you were the only one who held it together. Whether by, necessity or not, you didn't take advantage of the, not even loophole, just basically stealing. I feel like that deserves a little more. I mean, look, company side, they're like, oh, we just lost a bunch of money. We can't spend more on this guy. Fair enough, I think. I don't know. I don't have an MBA. But, you gotta give the guy something, right? A nice dinner is cool, but, basically running the building for a few months? Surely there's a pay increase that matches that, right? Next story. Not exactly the same, but once at a small company, we had this one guy everybody hated who quit infrequently. He would usually go on a bender for a few days and then come back and go to work like nothing had happened. And the owner didn't say anything about it, and neither did he. He and the owner were both acerbic jerks. He made money for the company, and the owner didn't work in the field with him, so I guess he didn't care. Anyway, one day, this guy had PO'd a bunch of people, even more than usual. Had a fight with the boss, and quit. 10 minutes later, the whole field group, maybe 6 or 7 guys, assembles at the owner's office and says, "Hey, look, you hired the guy back again? We're all gone." I run into the guy occasionally in the field. He's a contractor like me. He learned nothing from the experience. Still a piece of crap. Next story. I worked in a tech support call center for some very crappy online backup software. The supervisors treat you like computers. They don't care about your feelings or workload. They just wanted short call times. They didn't care that you were snowed in or bedridden. If you call out, you're written up. The place had a 155% turnover rate one year from people having enough. This year is on track for being the same. Personally, I quit when they tried to stop my wedding by calling me 2 days before my wedding and saying my time off wasn't approved. The time that I put into the system had been approved for 6 months prior. What sucks is that the business probably won't go under anytime soon. The product rips people off so much that the company's making bank, and the economy is so bad that they know for every call center rep that quits, there's a poor sap who needs to pay rent to take their place. Also, yes, 155% is the average of what they went through one year. For every 2 people they hire, 3 walk out. Next story. Our company was bought by a larger company. The sales and marketing team got a new boss. Within a week of the first meeting with the new boss, 75% of the team quit. No one outside of the team knew why. A few months later, I meet the new head of sales and marketing. He was insane. When one of the top sales guys put his 2 weeks notice in, he was escorted off of company property within an hour. The next guy who resigned was told he had to work the rest of the week with no pay so he could transfer his accounts over. Someone in HR had to explain to him that it is slavery and illegal. TLDR, new boss was insane and tried to bring slavery back. Next story. Last year, I briefly worked as a caterer. I only managed to work 3 gigs before I quit. The reason being that my boss tried to fit in 12 people into one minivan. He did this because he was charging everyone $10, so he benefited from it. At one point, we all decided that it was stupid and reckless for 12 people to be inside a minivan, especially since we were all sitting in the back, Indian style. After arguing with him to get another car, we still went to work. After that day, I and a bunch of other people decided never to work there again. Next story. I worked at a locally owned pizza shop, and I can say a combination of poor management and me quitting caused the business to go under completely. When I worked there, this was years ago, I was maybe 15 or 16. I got paid $5.35 an hour. I worked almost every day after school plus the rush nights, Thursday to Sunday, every week. I worked hard in there, in a crappy, freaking sweaty, hot, smelly environment to get crap right and get it to the customers. I came in early on days when I didn't have school to make sauce, make dough, do kitchen prep, etc. After a while of this, I went to my lazy bones boss and said, "Hey, Pat, I do an awful lot of the work around here, and I think I deserve a raise." Pat said, "Okay, we'll see what we can do." Fast forward to next paycheck, sure enough, I got a raise. 5 cents an hour. 5 freaking cents an hour. I said, screw that. Went to Pat again to put in my 2 weeks. He told me how entitled I was acting and how my job title of line cook was a minimum wage position. I might as well have been the manager considering he took off promptly at 6 p.m. every night. The 8 hours were 10 to 6 weekdays, didn't work weekends, and it left me and the crew to handle dinner rush. Anyway, long story short, I quit on the spot after the entitlement comment, walked inside to get my crap, told the rest of the crew what happened, and everyone else walked out with me. Everyone. Both her drivers, both of the other line cooks, and even the drunk mother effer who was our dishwasher. Within 6 months of that pizza shop, which had been in my hometown for at least a decade, possibly longer, was a hair salon with a new owner. I do think it's kind of funny that OP specified new owner. Like, yeah, I didn't think that the pizza shop owner just decided to open a hair salon next in the same spot. It just seems unlikely to me, you know? Next story. I worked at a place that provided parts and home services. I started a quitting chain there. When I started, we had an awesome manager. Dude was funny and took his job seriously. So as an employee, it was awesome to come to work and have a laugh with the boss and then get a no-nonsense and no bullcrap explanation of what was expected for the day. And then when he finally got his promotion, awesome for him, crap for everyone else. And here's why. The company is failing, especially the home services area. Lots of people were let go just before the manager left. So now we've got a bunch of people doing double the work for the same pay and rip-off hours. Work 7.5 hours a day instead of 8 so they don't have to consider you full-time and pay benefits. New manager was a total female dog. She got transferred from a different location because she wasn't getting along with her other employees. Yeah, give her another chance in a bigger store with more people. Makes perfect sense. So I'm starting to get real angry whenever I come into work because I've been moved from front counter to the back. I actually liked dealing with people and telling them the truth. According to the new manager lady, I should be ripping people off. For example, lady comes in with a vacuum. My power head stopped working. I take it, plug it in, and hit the red reset button. Vacuum head works. Manager finds out and yells at me. Should have put that in to be repaired. You cost us money. Yeah, 'cause charging some mother $96 to press a button isn't just the crappiest thing ever. Anyhow, end up in the back doing some other guy's job. Turns out he was the king of pooch pounding, so I could actually do all the work they expected to take a week in a day. They were also too cheap to replace my computer monitor and replaced it with a barely working TV that was returned. So naturally, I brought in my Xbox and spent a lot of time getting paid to play Batman. Whenever the manager was coming by, my buddy would make bird sounds and I'd change back over to the comp. Then, unfortunately, my grandfather passed and I missed 2 days of work. When I came back, I was yelled at for a long time about it from whiny manager. Whatever, she's just stupid. I go on about my day and keep working. Everyone comes up to me. Did she just yell at you for mourning your grandfather? What a female dog. The next day begins, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me. Stupid female dog calls me into her office to give me crap about, quote, being so far behind. And then I lost it. Basically, I asked, if someone close to you passed away, would you come into work? She replied with something about my grandfather's death being my fault, and I saw red. I lost my crap. I called her a fat freaking idiot of a harlot for sure because my friend told me it was hilarious. I said a lot more than that though, and left. About half an hour later, she picked a fight with someone else who quit, then a few front staff quit, then a few data entry people quit. A week or two goes by and more of the backside has quit. Another week or two goes by and friend A has quit. A few days after that, friends B and C have quit, and that's a major blow since the dumb female dog manager was relying on friend B to run the front and friend C to run the back. Last I heard, the company has finally fired her. Whatever, they did it to themselves. The company is dying and I'm happy it is. Next story. I was working retail, and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, and was never around when anybody needed him. Generally just a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends had just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. So-and-so told me you wanted me to get carts. Manager, knowing the kid has a record as an absolutely terrible employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, manager notices that we are completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimanded this kid and sent him to the lot. So he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day. Sits down with the HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling drugs to many employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. Then goes outside and calls the manager's work phone and leaves a message that he's going to screw him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management at everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you drugs? Have you ever seen him sell someone else drugs? Have you ever seen him use drugs? Have you ever heard him talk about using drugs? No, and oh, no. And everybody they talk to points the finger at the disgruntled employee. Everyone knows he started the rumor mill trying to get back at this manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left on his work cell, but they dismiss it because there's, quote, there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled in for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They still don't have any solid evidence against him, but this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Yeah, no crap. They hang out every day and these interviews lasted almost a week. Enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Screw this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started. Here are my keys." About half of the employees on shift walked out right there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Dude, I guarantee management or upper management, whatever you call them, were definitely thinking, we just got rid of a whole drug smuggling ring in our store. Everyone who bought drugs from this manager just left on their own. This is so much easier for us. Great work, everybody. Great work. I feel like you gotta take any tip off from someone who's being fired with a grain of salt, right? Surely there's probable cause for them to lie. Next story. In the summer of 2012, I was working at a Boy Scout camp when one of the senior counselors who had worked at the camp for years, I think 5 to 7, came out as gay and was immediately fired by the council. This caused a massive uproar at the camp, and about half the staff ended up quitting in solidarity, including many of the area directors and the program director. The rest of the summer was definitely interesting, because we had to run a proper summer camp with 50 to 75% of our normal staff, even after new people were hired on to fill some of the emptied positions. Next story. I worked at a Wendy's. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all of the shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacement. Turns out he hadn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit on the same day. Now, the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally 4 to 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow, but wasn't a hot spot. 6 usually only hitting for a few hour overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working always. This means he increased all of our hours as well and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. Next story. Once, a few people got fired and or suspended from where I worked because of their involvement in a Super Bowl pool. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and it all could have been avoided if the guy running it wasn't so brain dead. He was openly trying to recruit people to buy boxes on this grid he needed to fill. He was even asking managers at a company where gambling pools are forbidden. The company warned him about the rules, asked him to keep all the talk of the pool outside the building, and suspended him. When he delayed payment of the prize money to the winner of the pool, the first place winner said he would, quote, punch his lights out if he didn't get paid. They fired both of them, and a few other people were suspended for their involvement. Next story. I work at an advertising agency in South Africa. We once had to do a Christmas/festive season card for one of our major mobile networks, MTN. The concept was to show a summer road trip, an image of a map with stops at some of the major tourist attractions in the country. The idea being that wherever you go in South Africa, MTN has you covered. At each stop, they gave a quirky description of the fun you could have there. A team then had to take the same concept and create a Christmas card for MTN Swaziland. Swaziland is a tiny landlocked country within SA that's very badly run by a terrible king with 15 wives. The team created a card showing the tourist spots for Swaziland and made a quirky comment about seeing all the king's 15 wives, quote, spending like there's no tomorrow at a local mall. Needless to say, the card actually ended up going to King Mswati himself, who was very insulted. Swaziland is incredibly poor and the king is incredibly rich and abuses his wealth, but doesn't want to come across that way. The king insisted that people were fired over the incident. People at MTN lost their jobs, and we told Swaziland that people had been disciplined over the incident, while really we all just thought it was ridiculous. Next story. Not an en masse walkout, but sort of a snowball effect. I worked for help desk that had pretty awful management. It didn't seem too bad when I was a grunt. After I got promoted to a tier 2 is when it became abundantly clear that management had no idea what they were doing. It started pretty simply when I asked if I would get any training on how to do my new position. I was told that it was on-the-job training, which is fine if that's what they actually gave me. What they meant was, figure it out on your own. That was annoying, but if that was the only issue, I wouldn't be posting this. The wheels slowly started coming off. A couple people left, another got promoted out of the department. They never hired people to fill those places. Instead, they blamed my team for the lowered productivity. After about 6 months of declining productivity, management was convinced the issue was with the team, which was now down to half its original size. They instituted a policy where we had to report everything we did to management in real time. That was the beginning of the end for me. The proverbial straw for me came when they instituted a no talking policy, in which we had to ask permission from a supervisor to speak. I left the company shortly after that, and so did about 80% of my team. Last I heard, they'd only replaced one of the 5 people that left around the same time as me. Narrator's commentary. You know what, Opie? I don't get what you're complaining about. If people left, simply do their work. Duh. I don't see any world where fewer people means less work gets done. That's crazy talk. Next story. I used to work literally in hell. The real hell. This place was run by the most insanely tyrannical woman I've ever met. The industry is fairly specialized, but with the right in, you can break into it with certain background experience. I.e., it was medically related, so you can either have the specific education or a background in nursing, medicine, etc. The staff was about 60 to 70 people. When I started, only about 5 to 7 of those people had been there for more than 1 year. In the year I worked there, I saw 36 people quit and 1 fired. After I left, 4 others followed within the month. These resignations would come in waves. Once, 4 people put in their 2 weeks within 4 days of each other. One was a manager. The management was kind, but really run down due to the owner/CEO/president. Here are some of the problems. 1. Huge pay gap. I was making less than $20,000 a year with industry-specific education, but found out the pay range was anywhere from what I had to $55,000 for doing the same job with similar background. 2. The work distribution was skewed. I had 9 projects when I left, but others in my role had 2 to 3. Another reason the pay was so frustrating. The people making the least amount of money had the majority of the work. 3. They lied. My area was hit with a sizable snowstorm in February of 14. We were promised office closure at 11 a.m. pending that we all showed up at 7 instead of 8. This was so that everyone could get home before the weather deteriorated. At 11 a.m. they announced they changed their mind, and if anyone left, it would be taken out of their PTO. It started snowing really badly within 20 minutes. They released us at noon because all appointments had been canceled and majority of the staff got stuck in the snow. Many took anywhere between 3 and 7 hours to commute. If we had left at 11, it wouldn't have been that bad. My boss got stuck and had to abandon her car and walk home. Sweet, sweet justice. Those were the biggest ones that I recall right now, but instances like number 3 happened all the time. They were extremely manipulative and disloyal. They didn't value their employees and didn't care that we were mistreated. Good, hardworking people are quitting all the time. I've seen people start working and quit within the month. I can't wait for the day they go out of business. And yes, I am very bitter. Next story. My mom used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mom to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman was introduced to her. And my mom's boss informed my mom she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mom was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and couldn't quit, so she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mom in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset by the situation as well. One morning, my mom walks through the doors and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well, leaving them to hire and train all new people right before the fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mom quit, and they had the balls to call my mom and ask her to come back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. Next story. I was hired by a man who owned 3 pizza chain stores. I trained at one store, worked there for a few months when I found out he wanted me to transfer to a different store, and after a few weeks, become the manager. Woohoo! Well, the new store, the current manager, every single day spent a few hours on the phone with her SO, screaming and yelling and crying right in front of customers. The employees would get high in the walk-in fridge. I'm not actually too bothered by that if they actually did any more work than the total minimum. So here I am, hired by the store owner, not the manager who hired all her friends. They didn't like me. They called me a female dog, a goody two-shoes. They were absolutely right. I fired them all, except for one new girl that started there the week before I did. It was a glorious moment, the most whiny moment of my life. Mother effers won't help me mop the floor, you're fired. Next story. I did work for a software development company. The guy who was the current CEO, you could tell, really cared about the company and the people who worked there. My boss got along with him. Hell, all of the senior positions and team leads got along with him great. Everyone did. All around nice guy. Well, there was another man on the board of directors who was, without a doubt in my mind, legitimately bipolar. Previously, this didn't matter so much as nobody really reported to him or did anything with him aside from an occasional interaction, so it really didn't matter much. You'd sometimes hear him going off about something or another in a public fit of rage, but it didn't really affect anyone since he actually had little influence on the work that was done there. Well, over time, the bipolar guy ended up with more money and bought the aging CEO out of the company and took the reins. The guy was nearing his mid-70s at least. You can't blame him for wanting out. I'm sure he has retired very comfortably at this point. Now, you had very intelligent and smart individuals leading pretty much all of the teams that worked there, and their team members looked up to them without a doubt, who would all now be reporting to the bipolar guy. Needless to say, this didn't last very long, and they started leaving very, very quickly. You can't take incredibly talented employees and expect them to report to somebody who they'll constantly be wondering if they'll be talking to Jekyll or Hyde that morning. Over the span of about a month, all of the team leads left, including my boss and roughly 40 employees out of the 80-ish that worked there. There was a very drastic change of culture from what used to be a laid-back, professional environment of mutual respect to one of accountability and corporate formality. This also started to become a penny-pinching era, and some of the devs were shafted on their overtime pay, which led to another exodus of about 10 more of them. It was honestly weird how quickly the office became a ghost town, although the whole thing amazed me quite a bit at how large of an impact one person in leadership can have. Next story. I worked for a pretty famous hotel in Virginia Beach. Some of you may have heard of it, the Cavalier. The original hotel was erected in 1927, and a new hotel was built across the street in 1973. I worked in the banquets department where we set and ran parties and events at both the hotels and one of our many banquet halls. Some of the people in my department had worked there since the 1950s. One little old lady I worked with had been there since they had renovated the old original building and before they had even erected the new modern hotel across the street. Up until 2 years ago, the hotel was run by Mr. and Mrs. Dixon, who made their fortunes running kyanite mines. Well, some of the Dixon family members sued Mr. and Mrs. Dixon on the grounds that they were not getting their fair share of the money. When the verdict came down, they had to liquefy all of their assets. While they kept a hold of the mines, the hotels were auctioned off to the highest bidder, who just so happened to be Bruce Thompson of PHR/Gold Key Resorts. Now, Bruce, for the past decade or so, has been buying property all over Virginia Beach, and with his wealth has been funding politicians and people of power and influence to gain favor in the local government. As of today, he has the mayor, the governor, and many city councilmen on his side due to his funding of their campaigns. With all that power and influence, he's been able to raise the taxes of the people in VA Beach to get city funding on all his development projects. So his company spends a little of its actual money to do anything it wants, really. When Bruce finally finalized the deal for the hotel underwent a gradual shift from a family-owned company to a corporate machine. Our breaks were cut in half. Many departments were terminated with no notice. They literally hung a sign up on the door telling our painting and maintenance department their services were no longer required. Me and the people in the banquets were untouched, except our then boss, but that's an entirely different story. Seeing as most of our money in the non-tourist seasons came from weddings and parties, we all kept our jobs and actually got a pretty good increase in hours due to us now having to do the functions of all the departments who were let go. So if we had no parties to set for, we were painting parking lots or clearing out basements. Well, this continues for a few months until the next fall. The banquet team was tasked with setting up a room with 50 rows of chairs, about 500 chairs or so in all. It was in our main function hall. After we spend most of our morning setting this room up, we're told to wait in the room for our next instructions. As we're sitting in there, we start to notice more people that work with us starting to walk into the room. Now, we weren't idiots. We know what the hell was going on. We've all been expecting it for months. So a representative of the company comes up and tells us what we all knew. Since they were doing a complete renovation of the hotel and all the surrounding area, including buying out people's mortgages, they no longer needed to keep the hotel open, thus no longer needing the workers, and in one fell swoop, they let everyone go. The president who had been there for 30 plus years, starting in the banquet department, the little old lady who had spent most of her life in the hotel, the college students trying to make enough money for education, and me, the banquet captain, who is looking forward to an unemployment check. TLDR, local property mogul buys historic motel I worked at and makes us set up the room in which we would be terminated. I just can't imagine how soulless you have to be to do this. Money has to be the only only thing you've ever thought about for this thought to even cross your mind. I swear. Absolutely disgusting. Next story. Remember Walden Books, the bookstore in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed into the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked retail before, you know, this is impossible. My friend argues with the DM, and the DM basically tells him he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done. It will be done, or he'll turn the entire staff. Fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24/7, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag, and miracle upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit to working off the clock. When they get to my friend, he tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, how else would we get this done within the deadline time allotted? You knew what the store looked like before, and you know how much time we had. The LP guys just looked at each other and then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend. Next story. 7 years back, we had an office Olympics. Each team had to come up with a team name and a flag for their team. A team chose the name Team Shockers. They made a flag with 2 hands doing the shocker sign. They called me in, the office pervert, and showed me the flag. I told them, you can't put that out. The guy said, we checked with the team manager, he said it was okay. It was up for over a week with no problems. Apparently one of the older office ladies asked someone what it meant. All hell broke loose. The flag was taken down pretty quickly. HR got involved. 3 employees and the manager were fired. They had all been with the company about 10 years. Worst part was that we didn't even get to compete in the office Olympics. Lots of shocker jokes since that happened. I have no clue what the shocker thing is at all. I don't know how I don't know this, but I simply don't. I'm sure someone's going to say in the comments though, so please enlighten me. Next story. A friend I work with used to have a job with a large hardware store chain in the Midwestern US when he was out of high school. He got to go to different stores and try to steal stuff without getting caught. If he got caught, he had an ID number and the store chain owner's personal phone number for emergencies. He told me about the time he went into one store and grabbed a couple of things and nonchalantly walked out. He wasn't caught, so he set the items in his rental car and went back. This time he stuffed a couple things under his shirt. Nobody noticed. The cashier waved. The third time he went in and got something big that took 2 arms to carry. Nobody said anything as he walked out the door. So the 4th time, and several times after that, he got a cart and got big stuff like a roll of carpet and a chandelier and wheeled them out. The employees actually helped him with all of it. Finally, he was standing there and it was 8 p.m. and he had a parking space full of stolen crap in the parking lot. Nobody said a thing. So he called the store owner directly and told him what had happened over the course of the day. My friend said you could hear the angry silence over the phone for about 30 seconds. The owner walked into the store the next day and promptly fired everyone who my friend had seen or interacted with who hadn't followed security protocol, and fired the manager and assistant manager as well. Next story. Late to the thread, but it's probably for the best because this is going to come off as egotistical. In college, I worked for 2 grocery stores so that I could get full-time hours. One was a much bigger retailer and the other was a smaller store that only had a couple dozen locations in the state. The first job will always go down as the worst job I ever had. It was dehumanizing. Do not talk, do not move from this spot. They dictated what you could say to customers, and the head manager spent his entire shift in the office watching the cameras. From the day I was hired until the day I quit, I never said 6 words to him. I had to get the second job because due to the economic downturn, the store began cutting hours, to the point I went from 39 hours to 10 if I was lucky. Worse than that, I was only ever scheduled for 3 or 4, and they would tell me to be on call as if I were a doctor or firefighter. They'd call during school hours, which they knew, and when I couldn't come in, they would use that as proof that I didn't really want the hours. The second job didn't have enough hours to go around, but the manager was a really good guy, easily the best manager I've had. Would try to pencil in people where he could. Things changed at the start of the new year, where the second store had seen higher profits and better performance than other stores in the area, and as a result, we're getting better funding and attention from corporate. Suddenly, we had more hours to spare and the money to hire more help. They offered me a management position, and I took it. But my first job was suddenly determined to make me see through my 2 weeks' notice, so I tried to honor that. I had been at the first job for 2 years and knew all of my coworkers. I got a good reputation because I kept people laughing and it made the shifts go faster. I just got along well with everyone. When I put in my 2 weeks, I had a lot of them asking me where I was going and if they were hiring. So I went to my other manager with their names and applications to see if there was anything he could do. He hired 13 new employees straight from the competition. I worked that job until I graduated, and some of the employees are still there. At one point, the first job offered me a position in management with a pay raise. I told them I would call and let them know. Told my other manager what they offered me, and he did $1 better. Narrator's commentary. There are not a lot of good managers in this thread. So hey, this is a refreshing change of pace. Hell yeah, whoever this is. When people like working for you, they tend to do a better job. Crazy concept, I know. Next story. My team of 5 was asked to replace a major piece of software that was critical to a large revenue-generating department in 11 months. Normal timeline for implementation is 18 to 24, and we were on the larger side of the facilities going to a software. We were already understaffed, and over the year we worked countless overtime hours, traveled to the software vendor for training many times, and got the project ready on time. Go live was a mess of 12 straight 16-plus hour days, but eventually we had the system in and stable, and it started to make the department better. The staff were promised bonuses for meeting the deadline and not slipping the date, to be paid out from unused project funds. Despite hitting the go-live date and having more than $1 million left in the project pot, the IT team was criticized for most of the issues that happened during the 12-day go-live. The team lead was dismissed and no bonuses were paid out. Within 3 months, 3 of the 4 remaining members left, and all the positions are still unfilled. The one who got fired got multiple job offers the same day, and the 3 who left all got multiple offers within a month of the project ending. The team lost 30 years of experience in a week, simply because management wasn't willing to protect them. Ironically, the manager who threw the team lead under the bus was canned 6 weeks later. Next story. I worked for Environment Canada's Centre for Inland Waters as a lab technician intern through the YMCA back around 2010. Stephen Harper had just won a majority of the seats in the federal government, so many cuts were made to the safeguards of freshwater sources and the science behind it, and as a result, the building lost what seemed to be about 50% of the employees there. Some people were repurposed and sent to work in other facilities, but many highly trained, internationally respected scientists and researchers lost their jobs for the sake of allowing the oil industry easier access to natural landscape. It was a really depressing event to witness. Next story. I worked at a summer camp, and one of our kitchen staff members was fired because a helicopter mom thought that he had been rude to her precious little snowflake. So the staff all got together, and a strong majority agreed that the snowflake had been a rude little crap in most of the classes/activities and deserved to be told to sit the heck down and eat what everyone else has. So about 2/3 of the staff marched down to the camp office and sent in a representative who told the directors that if he goes, we all go. The operations director claimed we couldn't get solidarity, and this was just a stunt by 2 or 3 of us. But when he came outside, he found 25 of his staffers with bags packed, ready to roll. The kitchen staffer was serving waffles the next morning like nothing had happened. Next story. Back in my last year of high school, a co-op opened up 2 minutes walking distance from my house. And like a boy wanting money, I got that $11 an hour bagging job. $3.5 over minimum wage at the time. Everything's going great, making shrimp stacks, working with cool cats my age. Then hockey season starts. Tryouts are over and I get my hockey schedule for the next 2 months. Eagerly, I go to the front-end supervisor and request those days off. What's this for? They ask. Hockey, I enthusiastically reply. We don't work around your hockey schedule here. Excuse me? Here, calls over manager. Yeah, you're gonna have to quit hockey, Opie, cause we don't work around that here, the manager tells me. What a coincidence. I don't work here, I announce boldly. I'll be back in half an hour with my written notice. So I head home, write out my notice, and head back. Of course, people heard me and ask why I quit, so I explained to them why. But here's the kicker. This is Canada. More than half of these employees play hockey. Most of the rest don't want to work there if all their friends quit. By the end of the next day, half their cashiers and all their bagging people gave in their notice. Except for two. When I dropped by for some delicious jalapeno dill chips a few weeks after my last day, the front-end manager's picture was taken off the wall and the store's hours were cut. Friggin' idiot thought he didn't have to work around hockey in Canada. Next story. I was working at a well-known tire and wheel shop. The mass exodus happened in 2 stages. One led to the other. Saturdays were always 12-hour days for us. Also, it's our biggest day due to the fact that most people are off. So we open at 8 a.m., but we're all there prepping at 7 a.m. One Saturday, out of the blue, they had a drug test waiting for us when we got there. A little surprising since you don't have to take one to get hired. Anyway, all the grease monkeys, the kids in the bay changing tires and wheels, started freaking out. I was one of them. Being 17 and in high school, I smoked my fair share of pot, so I was worried. My manager notices and grabs us up and tells us not to worry. He's the one who checks the results, and he's not firing anybody over some pot or coke. Needless to say, 2 out of the 5 of us walked out the door on the spot. The remaining 3 of us took the test and busted our butts for 12 hours straight. We even skipped lunch to continue working. This goes on for a week. The 3 of us work overtime for a week and skip every lunch to keep up with the demand. To put things into perspective, there were 5 salesmen selling tires and wheel deals, and 3 people to do all the actual work. And during this hell week, only one of those sales guys actually came out to the base to help when he had a chance. The rest of them just kept selling crap. On the following Saturday, I was the only grease monkey to show up. I wasn't surprised. I knew what was about to happen. So I agreed to work the Saturday and asked if I could at least get 2 of the salespeople in the base to help me out. Only one of them comes out to help. He helped all day and didn't make a single sale. Mad respect to him. Closing time comes and I'm left, along with the other guy, to clean up the entire garage consisting of 5 full bays. Inside, the sales guys are probably chilling, laughing, probably talking about how much commission they earned for the day. So I walk in and ask for a raise. A couple of the guys chuckle, but I'm dead freaking serious. I figured I'd proved my loyalty and work ethic tenfold. I was the best guy in the garage, and I knew I'd be expected to train every single person they hire in the near future. At the time, I was making $7.50 an hour, which was pretty good for a 17-year-old in 2005. But it didn't reflect my actual worth in my opinion. I asked the lead manager for $9.50 an hour. I was shooting high in hopes of an acceptable rebuttal. He simply said, "I don't make that decision." Bro, you're the store manager. How the hell do you not have any input concerning the pay of your own employees? I told all of them to go screw themselves, except for the one cool guy. I stopped by a week later to get my check and they still hadn't hired anybody. I get a smile out of seeing all those idiots making sales, then doing all the work themselves on a nice, hot, humid Florida day. Next story. We saw the way the company was going. Suddenly, contracts weren't being renewed, and then people were getting fired for silly policy violations. Then they said we can't do raises this year. Things like that. It was obvious they were getting ready to do mass layoffs, so most people walked before it even happened. Sure enough, the week before Thanksgiving, we were all given 2 weeks' notice and told our jobs were now in the Philippines. Since I was in the IT department, I was given an extra 4 weeks to help clear up, but I got a lucky break and so started a new job with a much higher salary before the 2 weeks were up. The funny epilogue is that about 6 months later, they wanted to hire me back with a 25% pay raise. I guess the outsourcing didn't work so well. I politely told them where to shove their job. There are a lot of posts that end with that exact same thing, huh? I've noticed it like 4 or 5 times, the whole "I told them where to shove the job" thing. Is it that common of a saying, or is something weird going on here? I mean, it's a fair comment when given the situation, but it's just weird that people have said it almost the exact same way, you know? Next story. I worked for an airline as a mechanic. We had a 727 cargo jet in our hangar for months undergoing a D-check, a massive inspection and maintenance task that involves removing and replacing a lot of aircraft skin and structure, as well as wiring, equipment, etc. It is basically a massive overhaul of the aircraft. While this task is ongoing, the aircraft is lifted up on jacks that fit under the wings, nose, and tail of the aircraft. Anyway, back to the skins being replaced. Lots and lots of panels were riveted into place over the course of weeks. Lots. When the day came to lower the aircraft because all of the work was done, someone in charge got to place anybody on the tail jack. As all of the other jacks were slowly lowered, the tail jack suddenly punctured the mounting point at the tail and basically opened the tail like a zipper. It sounded like machine gun fire as the sheared rivets sprayed across the hangar. Within minutes, every person standing in that hangar was fired. Just about everybody was hired back the next day, but at that moment, some pretty important people lost their jobs permanently. Next story. Does threatening a mass quitting in order to enact change count? I'm an ESL teacher in Korea. My first job was a bit unique for teachers here. Most teachers are either employed by a public school through the GPIC or similar program, or are directly employed by a private hagwon, which is like a cram school. I taught at a private elementary school for rich kids, but was employed by another company that was contracted to the school to run the English program. This other company was also a publicly owned company, and by all accounts, was not doing very well. They normally employed teachers at hagwons owned by the company. We were their only contracted workers, and there were only 11 of us. From the start, they treated us badly. Very little help setting us up in our new location, literally the other side of the planet for all of us, which they were contractually obligated to do. No help with things like materials and no communication. We had one person who was supposed to be something of an intermediary between us and the company, but he disappeared after a week and would show up maybe once a month to exert the iron fist of authority over our workplace, then screw off not to be seen for another month. I could tell stories for days about how much of an idiot this guy was. So arrogant and convinced of his own superiority, horribly condescending to all of his underlings. But you get the idea. They basically didn't give a crap about fulfilling their end of the contract, but demanded that our end be followed to the letter. They were requested to provide us with furnished housing. We had one couple working there that was under a bit of a special contract together. They had separate contracts, but the housing portion was for one apartment together. When they arrived, they were put into a filthy, run-down one-room apartment with nothing but a mattress on the floor. They went straight to the company and threatened to take them to the labor board if they didn't fix that. Shortly, they had significantly better housing. Most things weren't like that. It was generally little things. We were required to work until 5 p.m. despite school ending at 3, and generally being able to finish things like lesson planning in far less than 10 hours a week. They didn't care if we did anything, they just demanded we be at our desks. A lot of people slept, and that was perfectly acceptable. Our supervisor thought this was stupid and started letting us leave when we were finished teaching. One day, the company man shows up, sees that many of us weren't there, and blows his stack. Says that if he ever sees that again, we're losing pay for every minute we're not here. That was pretty much the extent of the interaction between us and the company. They never saw normal working conditions, never offered any form of assistance to us, just showed up occasionally to try and catch us doing something wrong so they could threaten us. Finally, during the summer vacation, we had a week off. Now, the kids were off for several weeks, but there was a summer camp that we ran for the first 2. Then we had our vacation. Then there was another week that the kids were gone, but we were required to be at work. We had literally nothing to do. We'd already busted our butts working in the camp, and our lessons for most of the next semester were already prepared. They just wanted us to sit at our desks with our thumbs up our butts for a week straight. Our supervisor, awesome lady that she was again, thought this was incredibly stupid. She gave us an extra 2 days off at the beginning of the week and said we only had to go in for Wednesday to Friday. This was fantastic for us, because we were all planning trips out of the country. An extra 2 days on a beach in the Philippines, or a few days in Tokyo for me specifically, was a desperately needed relief from the workplace we were in. Now we were actually getting paid that Friday during the vacation. A lot of the teachers were relying on this money to pay for the extra vacation time and ticket home since we were only paid once a month. Friday comes, and there's no money in our accounts. Saturday passes, and there's still no money. People are stretched thin now, and we're all wondering what's up. Monday, still no money. We all receive emails and texts from our supervisor. The president of the company has found out about the extra days off I gave you, and has decided to hold your pay until Tuesday. I'm doing everything I can. The president of the company had decided that since we weren't going to work until Tuesday, that he could just hold the money until then, and quite literally stranded about 9 people in foreign countries. After some quick messages between all of us, we told our supervisor to tell him that if we didn't have the money in our accounts by the end of the day, we wouldn't be returning until we were paid. We would be going directly to the labor board upon return as well. The money was promptly deposited and everybody managed to get home. That was the last straw, however. We demanded a meeting with the company's representative to discuss this. We sat down and he started to try to explain the company's position. We stopped him right there and said, "Stop, we don't care. If you ever try to pull that crap again, every single one of us is quitting, and you'll need to find 11 new teachers with 0 notice." As it turns out, unbeknownst to us, the company was on the verge of collapse. Their contract with the school where we taught was the only thing keeping the company afloat. Losing 11 employees would be the end of it. The school was rich, and the principal a very powerful and influential man. The parents of the students were diplomats, politicians, lawyers, doctors, entertainment stars. To have every single one of your English teachers just disappear, some very powerful people would be rather upset with them. Now, for the justice part of this story. In Korea, drinking with your coworkers and bosses is a pretty common thing. The principal was a tiny little Korean man. He often took us out for dinners and drinks. He was a fantastic man. We loved him, and he was very proud of the English department. After this incident, we were out drinking and we mentioned it to him. He had no idea. He'd never even heard of anything about the things this company was doing to us. He drilled us for more information, and after a while he told us not to worry about it anymore. He would take care of it. We never had a problem with the company again. At the end of the year, when it was time to renew the contract, the school dumped them and offered contracts to all the teachers directly. As far as I know, that company no longer exists. Next story. I never worked there, but there's a chain of grocery stores called Market Basket near me. It's family owned, and there was a dispute where the cousin came in and fired the very beloved CEO of that company. As a result, the employees and suppliers went on strike and quit. I went there during the middle of this and the store was still open, but it looked like a ghost town. No fresh produce or meat and hardly any staff. It was a decently sized store and a very big success story for businesses that care about their employees and strong leadership. It's actually a great place to get groceries too. I find that they have a better selection of certain things and lower prices than their main competitor around here, New Hampshire. Edit. I forgot to mention that the board of directors caved in and rehired the CEO a month or two after the strike, and stores were back to normal within days. I feel like something like this must have happened with a place near me, because it was the same thing except they didn't get better. After a while, it was just super understaffed, their deli closed, the shelves were basically empty for like 2-3 months. It was so sad to have a place that you regularly go to for groceries or specific things, and then there's just nothing there anymore. I'm glad this one came to their senses and rehired the person that people loved. I don't even get how they get to that point in the first place of firing them, but I don't know business stuff. I just talk into a microphone. Anyway, that's the last story for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.